Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing a full breakdown on the new hard breach device. This is a new option for many operators that used to have a lower pick rate. So these operators include Montaigne, Ying, Fuse, Finca, Amaru, No Capiteo, and Lion. So as you may or may not know, hard breaching gadgets, either if you're talking about main gadgets or even secondary gadgets, they all have a health pool and what their capacity is. So surprisingly enough, the hard breach charge has a 1 million capacity, which is as high as it gets. That is the same as a thermite charge. Or Habana pellets, those are 250k each. So the hard breach gadget is pretty simple at nature. All you have to do is just set it down like you would set down any other secondary gadget. For example, a breaching charge, and it'll automatically deploy. There's no pin you need to pull, it's just automatic. And it'll create a pretty sizable hole, at least a crouchable size hole. Or if you're talking hatches, it'll blow a hatch straight open. And from my testing, I've concluded that it's about 7.5 to 8 seconds is the total time it takes from deploying to actually being fully engaged and exploding. Now comparatively, if you're talking operator to operator, Thermite's looking at about 6.5 seconds, and then Habana's even higher at 8 seconds, and then Ace is a tiered thing, so it's 5, 9, 13, and that's per tier. And as for the size of the breach that is potentially made, the secondary gadget really doesn't compete with a Thermite or an Ace. Thermite makes by far the largest breach in the game. Ace, I think, is a second runner up there, and then Habana is all dependent on what you do. You could put down all of your Habanas, and that'll create an actually pretty sizable breach. However, that takes a lot of time, and honestly, the secondary gadget would probably even be better than doing that. But by no stretch of the imagination is this new hard breach gadget better in any way by time or size than a Thermite Ace for walls. And then of course, Habana's always going to beat out this new hard breach gadget as well in the hatch game because you just don't have the capacity of Habana. If you only need to get one hatch, then maybe it would be better to bring a hard breach gadget because then, well, you have your other ability as well, whatever operator you pick. But if you are trying to get a mass quantity of hatches, there's no competition. And that right there really solidifies that this is just a secondary device. This is not meant to take over anything. It's not meant to take over any of the hard breachers. It's just to add a new set of utility for weaker operators that need that little bit of a buff, just enough so they're at least usable. Now don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of backlash on Ubisoft for adding this because some people are very quick to assume that Thermite, Ace, and Habana are getting affected by this, which that is just not the case. The meta as it sits is very heavily defensive sided, and by making it so you don't always have to have a dedicated hard breacher every single game, it makes sense and gives weaker ops like Fuse or really any of these operators, for example, a place on the team, a place on the roster, and hopefully can boost up their pick rates. And in response to the people that don't think hard breachers are even necessary to bring anymore, I would give you the example of Sledge, Buck, Ash, Zofia, and then the normal breaching charge. This is a very similar situation. If you need vertical play, you're not going to say, I'm going to bring a breaching charge to do that. You're going to say, I'm going to bring a Sledge or a Buck. The same thing's going to go with hard breaching. If you need this garage open, you're not going to bring this new hard breaching device. You are going to bring a dedicated operator to that role you are trying to fulfill. Now, even more recent ones, I can give you two: bulletproof cameras and Valkyrie cameras. People said the bulletproof camera makes Valkyrie completely obsolete. You guys see how that turned out. It's just a worse version of it. Same thing with Claymores. Claymores were added to the game. Now what about Nomad? What's good with Nomad? Why would you bring a Nomad if the Claymore can watch your flank instead? So I've just decided that people are very quick to assume things. But the goal with the secondary gadget is to add the same utility but at a lesser scale, at a weaker scale, and a easily destroyable scale. And when I say that, I mean this is the easiest possible thing to bandit trick in this entire world. I'm just going to show you guys a raw gameplay clip, and just listen for this new hard breach gadget and tell me whenever it's placed down, because there's no way you miss it. I'm sure you heard just by that. The sound is pretty loud, so therefore it's going to be very easy to bandit trick if someone is actively bandit tricking a wall. And back to the secondary gadget talk, this is the same thing. The secondary gadget does the job, it just doesn't do it as well as the dedicated operators as it should. But that does not make this secondary gadget bad, and that is because these operators that are getting it. Let's look at a few of them. For example, we're going to look at Fuse, we're going to look at maybe even Montaigne. Those are two great examples. So Fuse has the great AK-12 and also has a pretty fun gadget to use. It's just sometimes situational, as in you need some vertical play to work with. Now throw this Hardbreach gadget into the mix and then boom, you have a whole nother operator because you are now the vertical king. So alongside of going up top and being able to cluster down grenades on the enemies, you also can get the hatch. This gives all these second tier operators, these operators that I wouldn't consider meta, they push them into a point where they could be used, if used correctly, they could become these meta operators for specific maps. And then Montaigne's a great example because you have this operator that's great for bomb game mode because you are really a great planter if you have that big old shield of Montaigne. But usually the downturn is you need that hard breacher, so you have to give up maybe bringing in Montaigne to bring a hard breach plus a Thatcher. But now you could bring a Thatcher and potentially just bring Montaigne and have that hard breach gadget. You'll have that ability to do 2 roles in one. First, you're the turtle, right? You're the Montaigne turtle, and you also got your team through the door. Granted, the breach isn't as good, it's not as big, it's louder, but it still did the job. And what I like even more about it is it gives the option. It doesn't make you do this thing, it gives you an option to do it. So overall, I hope you see the value in the new hard breach gadget. And just to conclude it off, I want to give the cons and then the pros of this gadget. So some of these are going to be some repeats of things we've said, some will not, but I want to start with the cons. So the obvious cons, the ones we already talked about, it's pretty slow at an 8-second deployment time, and it's also smaller than normal breaches, as expected. Now another con that I don't see a lot of people talking about, this is taken away from one of your secondary gadgets. You're going to have to give up nades, claymores, stuns, I don't know, any other thing that you might see value in. You're going to have to give that up for this hard breach gadget. So it's a trade-off. You got to pick either this hard breach gadget, so you need to know that you're going to need to use this thing, or you could potentially have like frag grenades. Another thing we mentioned, the ease of bandit tricking, very easy to bandit trick. And my last con, this one's really an opinion, but this is a way that Siege felt like they could fix their issues with some operators just being trash. Now, some of these operators are good, like the examples I showed, Fuse, Montaigne, I think those are great operators that have a good use, and now they have even more of a use and more of a reason to pick them. But some of these operators, they just threw it on there trying to hope for the best, when in reality, those operators need a different kind of buff, not some indirect hard breach gadget. Now into the pros. I think the pros are very simple. This gives an alternative to a hard breach. But now for another pro that I think is the biggest pro is these are operators, all the operators that got this, these are operators that are good to an extent, but they are way down the list compared to what a meta operator is. I'd make a case that Capiteo is a really good operator, Montaigne, Fuse, they're all really good operators. They're just somewhat situational to say the least. But by adding this for Lion and Finka, for example, you're making it so Lion and Finka players don't have to feel bad for picking these operators when they could have picked a Thermite, a Thatcher, something else that is a little bit more useful. These players can play these operators that they want to play without feeling bad about it. But my biggest pro is there's a trade-off for everything. I have a hard breach gadget. I could pick this or I could pick grenades. Which one do I want more? Do I want a bigger breach? I could pick Thermite. If I want a smaller breach but a different ability, I could hard breach gadget, and I could also have Fuse cluster grenades. So if you want my opinion, I think it's great for the game to add something like this. They've been adding them for years. As we've spoken of, bulletproof cams, claymores, just things like that. It adds a whole nother dimension. It adds this choice of the player. Siege has always been about every little choice you make makes an effect on the entire game. And this just re-solidifies that. So I would love to hear you guys' opinion on the hard breach gadget. Also, was this video helpful for you guys that don't know anything about the hard breach gadget? Would like to know that as well. And I'm always open to any criticism you have of the video and how I can make it better, and of course any new video ideas you guys have. So feel free to suggest those down below, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. And you should have a fantastic rest of your day as long as you subscribe to my second channel.